Hey guys, what's up? Nick Ortiz here today with Ryan, and we're going to be looking at reasons why after you get your blue belt, submissions become a lot more difficult to obtain. When you're a white belt and you're with other white belts in your white belt class, you learn 3, 4 submissions, you get really good with 1 or 2, and then you're just hitting those submissions, you're feeling really confident about them. Sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't, but let's say 80% of the time you do because you're with white belts and they're not really defensively sound. Then once you get your blue belt, especially when you want to do competitions, you realize the ways or the means of getting those submissions that you used to get as a white belt just completely go out the window. You can't just, go into a Kimura. You can't just throw up a triangle. A lot of people have situational awareness. They're very defensively sound, and they start to pull away from you, and you feel like, man, I used to hit submissions as a white belt, or I felt like I was getting good at submissions. And now as a blue belt, especially if I'm competing in tournaments, I feel like I can't submit anybody. When you feel this way, understand that it's very important to simply attack your opponent's balance first. There's 2 ways I like to have in terms of like an indication of when to go for my attacks. One of them is getting an off balance. The other is looking at their posture. If you understand these 2 things, setups become so much more prevalent, very, very easy to understand. And you're not just throwing submissions out of nowhere, you're setting them up so it gets a lot easier. And then the more you progress in jiu-jitsu, the more you'll realize your failed triangles from your setups lead to other submissions. So then chains start to make sense. So let's look at this from a conceptual idea, and let's also look at this from a visual standpoint. How is this going to look visually? So let's say Ryan is in front of me on 2 knees. And from here, if I just try to throw up a triangle, Ryan's just going to look to get vertical posture. And I can't, I'm never going to be able to take my hips up off the mat and reach and get my legs around his head and shoulders. There's just no way. This might work against a white belt or somebody who's unaware, but once you get to a certain level, everybody's aware of what you're trying to do. So from here, as you noticed, Ryan starts to pull away. If Ryan's pulling away, this is the perfect time for me to push him in a backwards direction because his shoulders are above his hips. If his head and shoulders far exceeded his hips, he'd be more inclined to come forward. This would be the perfect opportunity for me to snap his hands down to the mat, get his elbows down to the mat. So we're always looking at posture. If Ryan, as I pull him in, pulls away from me, I'm going to look to push him in a backwards direction. Either he falls, or as I push him back, he catches his base with his hand. So as he pulls away, he catches his base, and this 1/10 of a second where he catches his base is enough for me to start going in on the attack, whether it be standing up and pushing him in a backwards direction to get an easy sweep, whether he comes forward. As he's coming forward, look, his head and shoulders far exceed his hips. So he comes forward. I can't push him back, so I'm going to snap him down, and I'm going to go into guillotines. And that's how you look to set up your attacks with posture. So that's one method. Another method is using off balances. So let's say if Ryan is standing up, and I'm having a difficult time doing whatever I want to do, leg attacks, inside position, that sort of thing. I need to attack his balance first. Right now, Ryan is in a stable position where if I try to do anything, he'll dig for underhooks, he'll snap my hands down to the mat, he'll make it very difficult for me to come forward. Let's say Ryan's head is in front of me, I can't come forward, his head and shoulders far exceed his hips. So now I'm just going to look to raise my hips up and get his hands down to the mat. And from here, I can start attacking front headlocks, all sorts of good things from here. Now, let's say Ryan is standing again. As we're here, forehead to forehead, and I look for this collar tie, Ryan pulls away from the collar tie. It makes no sense for me to snap him down now. So as he's pulling away, I might just go into double koichi. Let's say he stumbles, but he catches his balance, and I can't sit him in a backwards direction. That's fine. That pulls me into ashigarami. So now we're utilizing, thank you, Ryan. We're utilizing these setups of off balancing our opponent, whether it be getting their hands to the mat, getting their butt down to the mat, and elbow down to the mat. We're using that as a means of setting up these attacks so that we can start to make things a lot more easier for us. These conceptual ideas, instead of thinking about attacking with submissions, are more so attacking their balance first, then the submission is going to be paramount in your progress. It's very, very important that we just don't think of it as getting submissions, rather attacking their balance and making them uncomfortable and setting things up. The second is always looking at their posture. If Ryan's head and shoulders far exceed his hips, it's really easy. As you can see, his hands come down to the mat. All I have to do is push him forward, and it's really easy to get those hands down to the mat. If Ryan is standing upright, it makes no sense for me to pull him down, so I'm going to push him back. And maybe when I push him back, he comes forward. As he's coming forward, I can snap his hands down to the mat. So that's what we want to look at whenever we're having difficulties with submissions. Think about saying, okay, why am I not submitting my opponent? Rather, what am I doing incorrectly where my setups are pretty much ineffective? Or rather, not your setups, but what am I doing that's not setup based? So when I'm going for submissions, am I just too obvious? And if I'm too obvious with my submissions, what can I do to disguise what my intentions are? It's all about setups. Practice your setups. And once you get better at setups, submissions become a lot easier to get. And when your opponent defends one submission, you learn to chain other submissions until you get that one breakthrough where you get a victory. And then again, it's all about making things as easy and simple as possible.